we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to our next episode in the Sanctum Files podcast, a show which we bring through both interviews and discussions the world of the Master of Darkness, of the pulps, comics, films, radio, the Shadow. But today we're going to be taking a bit of a break, talking solely about the Shadow. Today we're going to be discussing his big brother character, a fellow Street and Smith hero, the Man of Bronze himself, Doc Savage. And today I have an author with me who wrote a story for him, although it is more of a pastiche of the character. But if you're familiar with the character, you'll still see like his essence is still there, still prevalent. It's still the same character. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to introduce our guest, Mr. Glen Held. Glen, pleasure to have you with us today.
Hey, Scott. Thanks so much. Really appreciate being here.
Well, Glen, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, you wrote for the Doc Savage pastiche character, Doc Talos, but what you sent to me was a story involving that character and your creation and iteration of the Shadow, the Whisper. Do tell us a bit about that and how you got this writing assignment.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So there's a character called Doc Talos, and Doc Talos has been around for a while and came out with a magazine about 2 years ago, Doc Talos magazine. It's more of an adult version of Doc Savage, meaning that the violence is a little greater, there's sex, there's swearing, things that would be done at the time but couldn't be spoken about in the pulps. I saw the magazine. I saw a number of friends of mine had articles in it, and I looked at it and I said, I always wanted to watch, to write Doc Savage, something with that. I started reading Doc Savage a long time ago, back when it started coming out in paperback from Bantam, and was drawn in really by the Bama covers for the Bantam paperbacks. I'm sure you've seen them. They're
of course
one of a kind.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I saw this magazine and I read it and I liked it, and I contacted the editor and I said, look, would you mind if I wrote something for this? And he said, well, tell me what idea you have. And I came up with a story kind of based on Who Goes There, which became the movie The Thing, in 2 iterations. The old one with James Arness as the monster, and the newer one, newish, 1980s, I think it was, with Kurt Russell as McCready. A lot of people think that the Doc Savage character or McCready is a pastiche of Doc Savage, but I don't know about that. So I came up with a story with the Rennie character, which in the Doc Talos world is called Renner, and how he went to the North Pole and was in a compound there that found something under the ice, and we took it from there. My story was called Halt, and they liked it, so I kept going. I said, hey, can I go a little bit further? And they said, yeah, and I wanted to use the Monk character. Monk is, favorite of so many people because he's a fun character to write. He's ape-like, he's funny, he takes offense to things, has fights, funny fights with Ham, the other Doc Savage character. In the Doc Talos world, it was Andy Kingman is the name of the character. And my character of Andy Kingman had a run-in with Nikola Tesla, and went to his house on the North Shore of Long Island. It has German saboteurs, and I really got into it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I try and stay historically accurate to the time period, but again, you can update it with the language and some of the violence as needed. I don't do it gratuitously. I do it as I feel the story will need it. Going from there, I did another story in this series of Doc Savage pastiches that was called The Girl from Missouri. That was a bit of a change from what I had written before that. It was basically a story about a girl who was ill, and her last thought that she wanted out of her life was to have the possibility of meeting Doc Savage. So she came to New York to try and meet him before she passed. So it was kind of an emotional story, and I think it turned out pretty well. There was Doc Savage characters in it, Doc Talos, a couple of Andy Kingman, the Rennie character, and then I wrote a story called The Killer, and that's more in tune with what we're discussing with the Shadow. I had an idea about a meeting of serial killers, that there would be for whatever reason, I got into that later, there would be a convention of serial killers. And in Doc Savage, there's the Pat Savage character. Pat was always trying to prove herself to be part of the gang. She was a woman at the time. Women weren't really that strong or such, and she really wanted to be part of it, so she would do things to try and become part of the gang. In this particular story, The Killer, she heard about this serial killer convention and decided that she was going to go take care of it, to go up there without letting any of Doc Talos and his Fabulous Five know about it. On the way to it, her car breaks down and she goes to a gas station where one of the serial killers is, and they have a confrontation that ends very poorly for one of them, and kind of like stuck with her for a long time. And I we did there was one other story that I did that was a bigger story with a number of characters not relating to that one. It was about an eating contest, and that turned out to be a robbery, and they go on this trip. The Pat Savage character, Monk character, and the Rennie character across the country, and they break up a spy ring and that kind of thing. All those were collected in a book called The Killer. That's available at doctalis.com. So then I was thinking, what am I going to do next as far as this goes? I liked writing the characters. I wasn't sure where I was going to go after that. But then I decided, now, wait a minute, this is kind of a wide open area. Yes, Doc Talos has been around for a while, but they didn't have their shadow character in it. I did like the Shadow, not as much as Doc Savage. I did like it, but if I was going to do it, I didn't want to do it as a shadow character. I wanted to get something a little bit different with it. And I didn't want to, so I decided I was going to make him a woman, not just for the fact that it was, a different genre or whatever, to change it. I wanted to do it because I thought that the story would call for it. I do have two daughters who are very strong individuals, very strong women, and I've written women characters before. I did write actually a romance novel back about 1990. I thought it was a mystery novel, but they bought it as a romance. Go figure. And so I thought about it for a while, and I figured, yeah, I could do this. I can make the title character, the Shadow pastiche, a woman. And that's where I came up with The Whisper. And the reason I mentioned The Killer before is because it stuck in my head. If Doc Talos knew there was a convention of serial killers, then even though that was just kind of part of the story of The Killer, he wouldn't let that stand. So I had the story about this convention of serial killers where Doc Talos knew about it and he went to do something about it. And also the Whisper found out about it as well. And with her brand of justice, she couldn't let that stand. And then she went up to this convention, which I had set in Cooperstown, where the Hall of Fame is now, but just was being built at that time. And then they had their confrontation in that story, which
I was just about to ask the stories that you described at the beginning, the killer, the girl from Missouri, and the one you mentioned with the monk character. I was just going to ask is if people were interested in reading those, what book would they check out to read? What book would they find on the website? And just basically was asking about the title, but you gave that information for that one already.
Okay. So that would be The Killer by Doc Talos. You can find it on doctalis.com. It's sold through him. It's not sold anywhere else at the moment. So if you wanted to see it, you could certainly do that. There's a place called the Pulp Underground, and in the Pulp Underground, it's about all things pulp related, not just the Doc Talos characters, but Doc Savage, the Shadow, various other things. There's Will Murray writes there from time to time. You could see Charles Milhouse and his characters there, Jim Beard, John Bruning, all who have modern day. They're all new pulp writers, and we all congregate there, and you could find out some interesting things. Again, the reason that I mentioned that is there is a free download of the Girl from Missouri there if you wanted to see what one of the stories was like, what a pastiche is. You could download it there on the website.
Okay, I'll take a look at that and be sure to include that in the show notes. So that's
Thank
helpful.
you.
So Pulp Underground, cool. I'll include that and give our audience something to read.
Yeah, and it's free download. So if you don't like it, you didn't spend anything.
Right? Because free is always nice. Who doesn't like free?
Exactly.
Are there any other plans to include your character, the Whisper, in any future stories, or is that more like tied up between talking to you and between conversations between yourself and the editor? Like, is that something that has to be
Mhm.
planned out ahead of time?
No, I pretty much have, within reason, of free reign to write these stories. And so far, he's liked them and they're being published. So the
Yeah.
first story, Listen to the Whisper, which again was set in Cooperstown, is was published in issue number 12 of Doc Talos magazine. And it had a lot of different characters in it because I mentioned all the serial killers, and they all had different aspects to them that hopefully people will find interesting. It was kind of the ending I don't want to give away, but it continued onwards. And not the story is complete in and of itself, but the character of the Whisper continued onwards, as did Doc Talos. There was no finality to the character itself. In issue number 13 of Doc Talos magazine, which actually I just got from the editor something today, stating that it was just out. I'll get my copy in a couple of days. One of the stories in that is the second in the Whisper series,
Yeah.
and that's called What Lies Between Us. And it's a meeting between the Whisper and the Pat Savage character at the Stork Club in the late 1930s, and how they meet, how they interact, and why they're there. And it is again a standalone story, but featuring characters who you know or who you met in the first story, if not the Doc Talos pastiches. So as far as your question goes, I do have plans past that. Another story is going to be in issue 14, and that's a story entitled Blood and Thunder Before the Storm. It's
Mm.
kind of a longish story. It'll be out later this year, maybe the end of the summer. And that's a story that has the Whisper going overseas to sort of compete in a fight club scenario and in a foreign country right before the start of the war. It also has the Rennie Renwick character. Doc Talos is called Renner. He's there as well and has some other people in it, and that leads into the fourth and fifth story that have not been written yet, that I've talked to with Mal, who's the editor of the Doc Talos stories, and those are going to be bring the arc of the Whisper to hopefully to a close. Those two stories are going to be really a lot of fighting, a lot of introspection between Doc Talos and the Whisper as to who they are, what they do, because they're both even in the Doc Savage Shadow world. They were kind of, even though they fought criminals, they were diametrically opposed, kind of, to the way that they did it. Doc Savage was, apprehending them. Yes, a lot of the bad guys got killed, but he wasn't. He was against killing. He was more in reforming with his upstate New York college. Whereas the Shadow, guns ablazing, was out for justice, as he or she, in my version, felt fit to do so. So I'm going to bring in with the fourth and fifth story the upstate college, and then leading up to the Fortress of Solitude. And I'm not exactly 100% sure how I'm going to do it, but I do have some ideas. And once those are all done and published in the magazine, they should be. We've spoken about this, Mal and I, and they will be collected into a book form for anybody who would like to get them.
Okay. Oh, so that book is okay. So instead of buying just the magazine to read the stories, they'll eventually be collected in their own volume then. So that way you can read just your stories then.
Yes, yes, if you wanted to do that. I mean, the magazines have a lot of interesting stories and artwork and so forth and so on. But if you wanted to just read my stories, yes, they will be collected in the future. That probably I don't see being done until sometime next year, hopefully the beginning of the year. But yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Okay. Yeah, I read a PDF file on one of the. I'm actually still working my way through it. I'm actually reading a PDF file on one of the magazines just to get an idea because I've also
Right.
been speaking to Malcolm as
Right.
well.
Hmm.
Because along with the story that you sent me, that I read ahead, that which I read before. Actually, I finished up a couple days ago and sort of been rereading it. I've actually been reading a digital copy of one of the Ricky anthology book and one of the first novels because I actually plan on dedicating a separate video in this podcast. It's gonna be like a standalone one dedicated strictly to Doc Talos pastiche character and just sort of how like I've been talking with you and just kind of like talking about his
Hmm.
world and version of the character.
Yeah, great. I'll tune in for that for sure.
For those who may not know what we're talking about when we talk about his clinic, Doc Savage, or and in this case, Doc Talos, does not believe in killing. Obviously, I imagine he would kill, in which case, if it was a case of self-defense, or if like it was like his life versus someone else, I imagine if he had no choice, he would. But for the biggest part, Doc Savage does not kill. Instead, he apprehends. There actually is one question for you. I had a question. I read in a couple of the pulps and a few of the comics, Doc Savage uses something called mercy bullets, where it's more like it incapacitates and takes them out, but it doesn't kill them. Does the
Right.
Doc Talent use kind of something similar, or is he more like with his brains and like outthinking them? If you
Yeah,
know.
that's a good question. I haven't addressed that in any of the stories that I've written, and the ones that I've read did not really have the mercy bullets in them, but they were meant to knock the bad guy out rather than kill him. Now, Doc's crew, especially Monk, were very bloodthirsty, and especially in the beginning stories, really were going at it and killing people. And Doc knew about it and would scold them, and they say, "Yeah, we're sorry," and then kind of do it again. But they did have the bullets aspect, and a lot of times once they did, so I would assume Doc Talos has something like that. Again, I haven't read those stories yet, and I haven't wrote them. Once they did knock them out, they usually did not send them to the police. They sent them to this upstate facility where they performed an operation on them, which took out their evil aspects, so to speak, and they would go back into society, give them a job, and reform them and send them out. Pretty controversial nowadays, and I would assume at the time, pretty controversial then as well. Big debate between Doc fans nowadays whether or not that was something that should have been done, should not have been done, but that's what they had, and that's what they did at the time.
Kind of like an opinion question for you, although this might be outside both of our fields.
Mhm.
But I'm kind of curious to know about your opinion. The way Doc Savage, obviously, I can imagine the pulps and the Talos stories don't go into detail about what he does, but like the surgery to supposedly remove or the operation to like remove a person's bad tendencies. I'm not trying to get topical here, but like
Mhm.
realistically speaking, do you think something like that could like feasibly be like could something like that work in the real world? I understand like there's medical practices like like I don't know if they obviously do this anymore, like if they used to, but like lobotomies and things like that
Mhm.
nature, which are kind of concerning, but like do you think something realistically could be possible like that nowadays, or do you think it would be kind of more like and this could have a lot of legal ramifications and obviously like concerned legalities, so it's the best likely we would stay away from that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would do that nowadays, considering the legal system and suing and how much trouble they would be in. Yes, there are lobotomies, electroshock therapy that help people. Like if you remember, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where they pretty much turned them into a vegetable kind of at the end of it. Can it be done? Probably, could be. Uh, in the story I have coming out in issue 14, that is one of the aspects that I do address, with the one where the Whisper goes overseas with the Fight Club. Um, she finds out about this process, and she is not too happy that he's doing it, but again, it is something that will give her, that she can go and find a group of people. And then does she still want to have justice for them and want to kill them? Or is she figuring that they have already done their penance and she'll leave them alone? So that's coming up in the future. But as far as it being done, yeah, I would imagine we probably could do that. But again, there's lawsuits, because what if the doctor says, yeah, it's cured, and somebody goes back into society and then does something? Then it's who's to blame, who's going to be in trouble? Uh
Right.
Doctor.
That, yeah, that brings up a very valid argument. But again, I'm not talking like, oh, I'm talking like hypothetically, like, could
Yeah.
it be possible? But okay.
Yeah, hypothetically can be done. It's interesting. Doc Savage is mentioned in the book, Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, and they pretty much quote him wrong. But I believe it's one of the attorneys says, yeah, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the whole thing. He says, yeah, old Doc Savage had the right idea. He'd catch the criminals and send them upstate and take out all their evilness from them. And it was kind of interesting to have in a mainstream book. I don't know if it was in the movie that they did, but that was an interesting aspect that they did at least think about that at the time. That was, I think, in the 1960s or so. So yeah, I think it could be done. A lot of us who are Doc Savage fans, going back a ways. I mean, I'm in my late 60s right now. I started reading them in the 1960s, mid 1960s. Actually, it's an interesting story how I started reading them. I was in about fifth grade, and a fellow comes up to me from my class. I remember I was sitting there before class, and he was pretty much a tough guy, like kind of a bully, not to me, but he was. And he goes, "You see this book?" And he showed me the Doc Savage paperback, The Devil's Playground. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I want you to read this." I go, "Oh, is it good?" He goes, "I don't know." I said, "So why are you giving it to me?" He goes, "Because I got in a lot of trouble. My parents told me that what I have to do is read this book and tell them about it. So I want you to read it and then tell me about it, and then I'll tell them about it afterwards." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And then he kind of threatened me, and I said, "Okay, I'll read it." So I took the book and went home, and I started going through it, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Boy, this is really, my kind of thing, with the action, with the red herrings. Is it this? Is it that? And I came back and I told him about it. And I said, "Hey, look, Eddie, this is great. This is what happened, this and this is it." And went back to his parents, and he didn't get in trouble. So he was my friend, and he owed me a favor that I think I collected on. I don't remember, but that got me started. And at the time, uh in bookstores, they had old books as well as new books, things that didn't sell they still had on a shelf. So I was able to find all these Doc Savage paperbacks, which, when I got money, which wasn't often, I would go and buy two, three, four at a time, and then have the best time reading them. And that kind of started me on reading the books.
Outside of the Devil's Playground, I imagine so that was probably like your first exposure. Do you have a particular favorite story, or was it really just, or was it kind of that one, and then you built it up from there?
Yeah, I don't really have a favorite yet. It's like pretty much whatever one I was reading I liked at the time. The writing isn't great. The stories don't always make sense one to the other. But just the time period, the late mid to late 30s, early 40s, really appealed to me. Just the fact of thinking about all these going to a newsstand at the time and seeing Doc Savage, the Shadow, the Spider, uh, Secret Agent X, all these weird tales, all of them, not so much then, but all these things, you see pictures of it and you're like, oh my God, if I had $1 and I could go back then, I'd love to get any and all of these. So to go back, I can't really say, maybe The Resurrectionist, I like that one, but there are a lot of them. I have to say, I never read the last Doc Savage novel, Up from Earth Center, just
Okay.
because it puts an end to things. It was the last one published, not the last one written, and I just can't bring myself to read it. So hopefully someday, but right now, no.
Kind of asking sort of like a behind the scenes type question with Doc Savage. The Shadow, of course, was written by Walter Gibson, and he wrote a huge majority of those stories. But he had other writers, Theodore Tinsley, Lester Dent wrote one, The Golden Vulture, and Bruce
Yeah.
Elliott. Did Lester Dent, if you happen to know, or if I might have to ask somebody else, like, do you happen to know if, like, when reading the Doc Savage stories, did like Lester Dent basically like handle those all himself, or if it's like, or if you can tell in the writing style, like, oh, this feels different compared to reading this one, like, could someone else have written the stories as well, or do you think it was all just kind of just one just one
Yeah,
person?
right. So it was under the pen name of Kenneth Robeson, and Dent was the initial writer of it. He started out and he did the vast majority of it. I don't know the numbers. I think it was like 150 or something like that of the 182 that he wrote. But there were other people. Geez, I can't remember all their names right now, but yeah, there were people who Norman Daniels, I think, wrote one or two of them, or a dozen of them. There was some he did in conjunction with. There are articles. Will Murray is great, a great resource on these things. He's the expert on all things Doc Savage, and they know exactly how many that Lester Dent wrote, but he did write the vast majority of them. Walter Gibson did many more of The Shadow because The Shadow was twice a month for a long time, and Doc Savage was once a month. There were plans to make it twice a month, but it didn't happen. So yeah, Lester Dent did most of them, and some of the Lester Dent when he passed later on, Will Murray found some once he started some outlines and he fleshed them out in his the dozen or so Doc Savage books, authorized books that he did. So yes, Lester Dent did most of them.
Yep, the ones that come to mind, I've actually spoken to Will about this. I had an interview with him before, and he kind of made a post about this on his Facebook. The
Mhm.
ones that had the surviving, that were from the either surviving Lester Dent, either scripts or outlines, the two that stand out most to me, I remember from the post, is one called White Eyes,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Mhm.
then another one is I think that I was like, don't quote me on this. I'll have to end up editing this if I see. I want to say it's something called the Desert Demons,
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I
and I
believe it's it. I
something.
think it also the Jade Ogre,
Okay.
and uh, I can't remember the other names of the books. I have most of them. I've read most of them, but I'm sorry, I just don't remember the names of all of them. But he was great. He was friends, as he probably told you, I'm sure, with Norma Dent, Lester Dent's widow, and was granted access to all the files. I've met Will a number of times at Pulp Fest and the last time at the Windy City convention, and he's a great guy, a good resource. I was so happy last time I saw him. I said, "Hi, Will, Glen Held." He's like, "Glenn, I know who you are. You don't always have to introduce yourself." And I'm like, oh, Will Murray knows me. I thought that was great because he also wrote a number of Destroyer novels, um, which were all very good. Really, I thought those were fantastic. I very much enjoyed them as well.
I think I could be wrong, but obviously, like, feel free to correct me, or if I find something out to contradict it, I'll again put in the description notes. But I think it's because of Will, or maybe this was someone that picked it up later. I think it might have been because of Will or somebody else that we got the Doc Savage novel, The Red Spider, because
Yeah.
apparently, like,
Mhm.
I heard a story say it's like someone found his outline or his draft for the book and basically had it published, and that's how the Red Spider book novel came
Hmm.
out. Again,
Yeah,
because
exactly. Yeah, I believe he found it and edited and brought it to Bantam Books, and they published it. They published it. I remember, if I remember correctly, is a different story that it said the lost Doc Savage novel. It's like, oh boy, a lost Doc Savage novel. This is great, and it really was good. But yeah, that came out from that, and that was great. Any new Doc Savage was great at the time. You know, you go back and read it now, and it's a little cliched, a little dated as far as what they wrote, a little prejudiced at times. That was the time with what they wrote, a little sexist perhaps. That's why actually Doc Talos for now, for this period of time, is so good, I guess, because it's updated and it's more of a more realistic in an unrealistic world, basically,
mm,
as
yeah,
all
and
the Pope characters are.
yeah. Yeah, the first Doc Savage novel I ever read actually was the Sanctum books Red Spider, and that
Mhm.
one volume 15 because the cover caught my attention and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm curious to read the story, and that's how I sort of worked out from there and basically kind of just have been working my way through Doc Savage stories since.
You know, it's so interesting depending on how old you are. I mean, you're much younger than me. From my period, I read it through the Bantams. Through my grandfather's period, he read it through the pulps. There were the
Yeah.
Sanctum books. There were the comics. Uh, Anthony Tolan did a great job with the Sanctum books that are fantastic. It's a two in one with the pulp cover novels and the Bantam novels showing on the cover of it, which is great to see one from the other because the artwork is so fantastic. The Bama, the original ones were good as well. I think the shadow covers of the pulp novels were much better and brought in people's attention, but they're all good. There you go. Hmm.
Here. This one, just volume 32. For
Hmm.
me, this was also one of the first Shadow stories I read, and mainly it's again the cover, and just like,
Right.
okay, you just got to know what the story's about. Again, another one. This is volume 47. Of course, as we kind of have to tell people, the Sanctum books are now out of print, so to get some of these, you'll have to either spend quite a bit or to look very hard, especially some of
Hmm.
the latest stories, folks.
Oh, that's a
This one's
right.
volume
That
37.
yeah, that's
This
iconic.
yeah, this is the one that contains the Living Shadow
Hmm.
story as well. But yeah, and just again as frame of reference, I don't have the Bama cover on hand, but this is the volume 14, which prints the first two stories, The Man of Bronze, and its sequel story, The Land of Terror, for people.
Hmm. Yeah, that was a good one. If I could just tell you something a little bit interesting that I found about the first one, The Man of Bronze, um, the cover that you just showed, somebody does, Scott Cranford has the original of that, the original
Really?
painting from the 1930s in his house. Um, he's a great guy. He goes to Pulp Fest, Windy City, and he's got a number of covers. And I don't remember the story so much about how he rescued that and found it, but just to see that still in existence is really unbelievable that it's still out now.
Yeah, I'd
Somebody
like to.
has it.
That's cool to know as well. I can only begin to imagine how much he probably had to pay for it.
Yeah, it was something. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
But he
still
has
cool.
a lot. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say, but it's still cool to know that some of the original art and stuff like that still has survived the test of time rather than just being trashed and
Mhm.
people have it. So, but that's cool to at least, yeah.
Yeah, every now and then, what is it? I think it's the Heritage has them up for sale, and you'll see them for sale for a Bama, the not the Pope ones, from the Bantam books. You'll see them for sale for like 20,000, 30,000. It's like I wish I had the money to buy these.
Yeah.
My wife would kill me, but yeah.
Yeah. I have actually been seeing through like secondary markets, people have actually been selling some original have been selling and parting with some original pulps of both the Shadow and Doc Savage, but again, they're like in various conditions and qualities, so your mileage
Mhm.
may vary on what you choose to do with that. There
Yeah.
is one that I found, but I didn't purchase this personally. It's a Shadow pulp. It was like something like Racket Town or something. But anyway, the image was of the Shadow, like it was either him climbing a wall or swinging on a rope. And what I
Mhm.
had read the description on this item was someone had bought the original book, and this is the part that I like, how did you do this? They had cut it down to where it's the size of a regular book. Think like these sizes, but
Mhm.
cut down in half sizes. And
What a
I'm like,
mistake. Yeah.
yeah. But
That's just
apparently, like the guy said, like I tried to keep as much of the original art, but it's like he cropped it down to like
Mhm.
the size of like what you not a mass market paperback, but like the size of a regular paperback novel. It's just like, ooh,
Yeah,
damn.
that's a big no-no. I have a number of Doc Savages. I have only like two or three Shadows, but I have about 30 or 40 of the Doc Savages one. And when you see them, they're what are they, 80, 90 years old? They're in like you said, they're in various conditions, good, bad. The pulp magazines themselves, they were pulp. They were pulp paper. So it wasn't like a paperback nowadays. It was ragged on the edges. It was meant to be that way. However, the test of time kind of didn't really help any of these things with the pages turning yellow and what have you. They're really good. And sometimes you'll buy something like you saw that's trimmed. And a lot of times on eBay it'll say trimmed, and most people will be like, well, I don't want that because that takes away from the value of it. I did order some couple of years ago, and it came and it had like two little holes in it, and uh, the Flea Run on Facebook is a really good site. It's Doc Savage fans. It's based on the Flea Run is the pneumatic tube that Doc Savage's gang took to take them out of the Empire State Building, or as some people think mistakenly, the Chrysler Building, and would take them down to the garage or take them down to the docks where they'd get the auto gyro or the Hell Diver submarine. So there's a lot of discussions on the Flea Run on Facebook of Doc Savage uh, paraphernalia. So I did put a picture of this and I said, "What is this?" And there's a fella there who works for the Library of Congress, Canadian Library of Congress, with putting books, preserving books. And he said, "Glenn, don't put them near any of your books. Take them away because those are wormholes." So quick, I sent them back to the guy. I said, "I want my money back for this," which he did. But you have to be careful with the old ones with the damage they may have, the rips. I mean, there's going to be rips. How people repair them, or better off to just leave them alone. So you have to be careful with buying them. And they're not cheap nowadays. If you find something 40, 50, $60, you got a good deal there or so. When I was growing up, I remember in the 70s, or yeah, I guess it was the 1970s. I went to a place and the guy said, "Okay, this is $5," and it's like $5. I can't afford it. What am I, millionaire? I can't afford that. And now obviously I wish I had, but I don't know if they're a good investment, but at least they're fun to read and look at.
Yeah, or at least the collector values, at least saying I'm able to have in my collection one of the original pulps, even if it's just for collection purposes. Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, they're interesting. They're fun. I have them in my top secret cardboard box in the other room that unbreakable to break into, or so. When I pass on, I don't know what the hell's going to happen to them, but I guess we'll find out.
Do you have any questions for me? I was mostly just hearing a discussion with you and having you talk about your experiences with writing, and of course, hearing you talk about the Whisper character.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, how did you? I mean, you said your first one was one of the Sanctum books.
Yeah.
How did you find it? You just liked the cover and you started reading it and you said, "Hey, wait a minute, this is pretty good," because it's opening up a time period for you that you might not have been exposed to otherwise.
I actually picked it up along with at my local library at the time. I picked this up
Hmm.
like a number of years ago when these were still in print and I hadn't even known about any of them. I had picked that one up, and then the Nostalgia Ventures, because it still had that cover on time across and there's their Sanctum books. I had also checked out the Shadow. It was volume 7, the third Shadow.
Hmm.
And it was the cover on that one that got my interest in reading the back description of the item. It's like, oh, this sounds really interesting, because it reminded me very much of the radio episode, The Shadow Challenge, when Frank Reddick comes back
Hmm.
and he voices someone who is impersonating the Shadow, and it's like, oh, okay, that'll be really interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and it was. And what's also very interesting is the fact that some of these things, the man, Doc Savage, the man of bronze, Superman was the man of steel. Doc Savage had his Fortress of Solitude. Well, hey, look at that. So did Superman. So Superman really took a lot of it from Doc Savage. He doesn't kill people. Superman doesn't kill people. The Shadow, I don't want to say was like Batman, but in certain ways it was. And you could see on some of the Sanctum covers that they say this is the story that inspired the Joker. This is the story that inspired some of the other aspects of the Batman series.
Right. Yeah, and of course his name Clark Kent.
Oh
So it's
yeah,
Doc
yeah,
Savage,
Clark
Clark
Savage too. You're
Savage
right.
Jr. and the Shadow's Tridentity Kent Allard. So they pulled from both Doc Savage
Mhm.
and the Shadow in some aspects, and in some more than others.
Right, right, exactly. I don't know how they got away with it, but they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine if they had pursued lawsuits back then and had the creators of Street and Smith been caught aware of this with both for Batman's first appearance and for Superman, one can only imagine the popularity of how these characters would have been held up nowadays, considering Superman and Batman have been in the public mind for over 75 years by this point. Had
Mhm.
one simple thing changed, they might not have even they might not have even existed today.
Yeah, or at least not in the form that we know them.
Yeah, they would have had to have been heavily changed significantly and all that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. The other thing I would say to you, if you like some good stories, there's a lot of good stuff going on today in new pulp. There are I mentioned Charles Milhouse. He has his Captain Hawkland character. Flinch Books has a lot of good stuff that they're coming out with. Barry Reese, who I wrote for, has the Peregrine and Gravedigger and Lazarus Gray. And there's a lot of good stories out there, basically characters sort of based on the old time ones, with the same kind of style. And it's all very interesting. As a matter of fact, to toot my own horn, I did write with one of Barry's characters, the Peregrine. Uh, wrote a book on that was published not that long ago and recently won the award for best pulp novel of 2026. So I was very pleased with that, and do have some other stories there with public domain characters as well as originals, and a lot of good, interesting reading out there.
Cool, cool. Kind of what I alluded to at the beginning before we kind of started this podcast. With the nature of Doc Savage and the Shadow and of these pulp characters, would you say that their stories are just as relevant nowadays or can be enjoyed just as well versus how they
Hmm.
went back then? Because you told me about, obviously, of course, with our age differences, it's like I picked these up through these ones. You told me you read them through the
Through the
Bama
banter
or
book,
the
yeah.
Bantam paperbacks. So it's like there's plenty of time, like a lot of time has passed since then. And so it's like,
Mhm.
do you think these stories are still just as good? Because I know James Patterson has written for books for
Yeah.
both Doc
Mhm.
Savage and the Shadow, and they say they have been less than well received. So it's like, what do you think is the big I don't want to say like sticking point, but what do you think is like the core that keeps these characters? Sorry, I'm trying to find the best way to phrase it. It's
Yeah, I
like,
know, I know what you're getting at. Yeah. So I think these characters are really a product of their times. That to take them out of the 30s and 40s, with very few exception, they don't work. It should be what it was back then. The time period is very interesting time before the war, during the war, a little bit after the war, the Doc Savage or whatever, with the beginning of the Cold War. They work best back then. The what you said about the James Patterson, I've read the books. I didn't really like them that much. They did sell James Patterson's names on it. It's going to sell. The Doc Savage one, I don't remember the. I think it's his what is it, his nephew or something like that, a couple of generations removed. Really wasn't Doc Savage. If you take it as a novel in and of itself, it's not bad, but I don't really think it translates to the present that well. There was a DC Savage with Doc Savage, DC version of it with Doc Savage. I
Yeah,
remember.
Doc Savage's grandson, DC 1987 and 1988. First one was
Okay.
a four-issue miniseries written by Dennis O'Neil, and
Yeah,
then in
yeah.
'88 he wrote the first six issues, and then after that it was handed over to Mike W. Barr. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's Doc skipped a generation with his son, and then we meet his grandson, Chip.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the novel, the Grant Savage is the great grandson of Doc Savage.
Okay, that's from the Patterson book. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I don't think it translates well to this time frame as far as the original goes. If you want to write about, like you said, the great grandson or whatever, maybe it's okay to do that. If but don't expect Doc Savage because it isn't. The books with the shadow. I actually didn't hate the first book, but moving onwards, I really didn't like the other, especially because I think it was the second or the third book. I'm not sure. Some of it was written in the first person. And I don't want to know what's going on in the Shadow's mind. I don't want to hear that. I don't think that any reader wants to know that. I think the Shadow is such a mysterious figure that we shouldn't know what's going on in his head. The same thing with my character, the Whisper. I do it from a third person point of view because I, I don't think anybody wants to know what's going on. You want to be surprised, not by the thought process. Also, in the Shadow books by Patterson, they're giving powers to the Shadow to change shape. Yes, there was the Cloud Men's Mind, which is basically the Bradio, not so much as the pulps. Um, to me, it doesn't make any sense. And I think if you look at Spider Noir with Nick Cage, you see how well something like that can be done, set in the past, or at least a nebulous time, a little bit different than our own, going backwards. So it can be done. I think. I think it can be very successful, and I think a lot of people are going to watch it, as I believe Spider Noir is very successful.
Yeah, I watched the first episode for free and I enjoyed it. Then again, I kind of watched the Spyro Noir Nicolas Cage in the animated Spider-Verse movies. Like, okay, he
Right.
sounds good. How will he look in the part? Because he's a lot older now than he was back then. So it's like he seems to do the job well. He's like an older iteration of the character, but apparently they're saying it's going to be a season two.
Great.
So
Great. I love season one. Also, Sin City, if you ever saw that, that had the kind of taste that I could see, like a Shadow, a revival of the Shadow being Frank Miller's Sin City, the TV show, or the graphic novel, or the comics, whatever you want to say. Just a great series that you could anybody could read and hopefully enjoy.
yeah, I've seen like a trailer of the movie and like a few like sort of isolated clips on YouTube, but never watched it in order.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's all dating, all that kind of time period.
Just sort of like, I guess, unless you have anything else about Doc Savage, I guess like just sort of like in close, like sort of like not sort of like closing thoughts, but it's like sort of like a wrap up point is like obviously depending on what country you live in. I've heard some people up in Canada, and one guy even overseas commented and translated his post into English, but in Germany, different countries already have the some of the Doc Savage or the Shadow already like in the public domain that people can read online for free. It's like
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know Canada does. I don't know about the other countries. I'm not sure what year, but I think it's not that long from now that Doc Savage will become public domain in the United States, and we'll see what happens.
honestly, it wouldn't. I hope they don't wait till this long, but it wouldn't surprise me if it didn't go into the public domain, say on the 100th anniversary of the character. I can't recall what year the first Doc Savage story came
Yeah,
out, but it's like
I believe it was 33.
okay, 1933. It wouldn't surprise me if they did it on 2033 versus The Shadow came out in 1931, so 2031. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I
guess we'll
respect.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure because I'm not sure who owns the copyright now because is Patterson going to write anymore? I don't know. So
I
we'll
know
see what it
Christian
is.
Condé Nast has the license. I think they're still the intellectual property owners, and then they license the
Hmm.
character names out. That's how Patterson did his books. Honestly, I kind of read the first Patterson Shadow book, and honestly, like I really was not too fond of it. Mostly it was about the girl, and then
Right, right, yeah. How she
you put
developed her
out
powers. Yeah.
I thought it had a good opening starting during in the past in the 30s. It's like, oh, okay, this is not a bad start. But then it's like he gets poisoned, and then there's this huge time skip and all
Hmm.
that. And it's like, what the hell? But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it really changed. You're absolutely right. I felt the same exact way with the beginning in 1930s, which hey goes to show you that maybe there is room for more books set in the 1930s with the original time frame.
yeah. The question is, you just have to get someone who knows the material well enough to not mess it up or distort it too badly, and to tell a good story.
Hmm.
You said you mentioned others like Jim Beard and a few others.
Yeah, they don't write for Doc Savage or The Shadow, but they are in the new pulp field, which they have their own imprint, Flinch books and Becky books, and they write of characters based in that period of time, the heroic character, whether it's someone who has who is stronger than smarter than others, or somebody who is in the service or so, or fighting against bad guys, so to speak. And there's again the new Pope field is plenty of things like that. Brian K. Morris's The Terror is very good. Robert Mendenhall's codename Intrepid is fantastic, and there's so many good things out there that sort of wish I had much more time to read them all.
Yeah. It's for me, it's more like I'm trying to figure out it's like once some of these stories go into public domain, isn't there unless this is with the copyright holders, wouldn't there be some creative licensing enough to say I saw someone do this as an ebook. I'll have to send it to you if I can find it. But someone took a story of Brand of the Werewolf, the Pat Savage story, and
Hmm.
did there was a story that was an in between kind of thing or something that took place right after. And then apparently, I don't know if it got shut down or hushed up, but there's something out there. So basically, I'm trying to say it's if unless it's creative licensing, when these characters hit public domain, it's you could imply or use observations could there be stories that take place in between those pulps,
Hmm.
and so to tell those stories. But the problem is would that be under a strictly a new, if that was published as a new adventure of Doc Savage, but it's I don't know what the
The legalities of it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I really don't know. Once something's in public domain, it's up for grabs. I wrote a story for Airship 27 is another publisher who I work with, who published a couple of my short stories in an anthology. And also I have a pulp team up novel called The Devil You Know. That I wrote for them that was very well received, and the sequel to it should be out hopefully later this year. It used a number of public domain characters, such as the villain of the piece was Dr. Satan. Ascot Keen is the person who goes against him. Secret Agent X I had in it. Ravenwood, the stepson of Mystery, and about three or four others that I used in a story where they all teamed up against Dr. Satan, who then teamed up with him to fight the Nazis at the time. The new story that I have coming out is using those same characters, plus about seven or eight other ones later this year in a real battle royale coming out again later this year by Airship 27. And there are tons of the old pulp characters who can be used again, like a Secret Agent eight or Operator Number Five, who are up for grabs, and people do. Will Murray wrote something, Doctor Death novel that had a lot of those characters in it that are
Oh yeah,
main.
I know the Will Murray book you're talking about. And taking a quick pause for a minute, you mentioned a book about Doctor Satan. What
Yeah.
I'm unless if I'm talking to you that did it, it was a book called Hounds of Hell, which was
Yeah,
a book
that's
that was that yours or
no,
was that
that was done by that was done by Ron Fortier from
yeah.
Airship 27. So he wrote that about 10 years before my novel came out. And he's actually the publisher of Airship 27. So yeah, he wrote that with Dr. Satan and one or two other characters. And that was an enjoyable book as well. You know, the characters, they're good. It's like you read a Superman comic and who wrote it. Okay, Siegel and Schuster did it at that time. John Byrne did it. Danny O'Neill did a couple. Mike Barr, who you mentioned before, has done it. All these people have done it. And if it's a good writer, you're going to get a great story. Alan Moore had some fantastic Superman stories.
I did not know Alan Moore did
Many great.
Superman.
What's that?
I said I did not know Alan Moore did a Superman book. That's interesting.
Yeah, he did. I think it was I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was the last artwork that Kurt Swan did of Superman, and I don't know if it was called The Man of Tomorrow or something like that. It was a very, very good story. His other stories, obviously Swamp Thing and Miracle Man and those kind of things were fantastic as well, but that was a very good story too. A little different than your normal Superman story.
Okay. And remind me, what was the one that you did with Doctor Satan? Since I know it wasn't Hounds of Hell, what was the
Oh,
one that
okay.
what's yours called?
Yeah, it's called The Devil You Know,
The
and
Devil.
that's available on Amazon. It's
Okay.
1 second. Yeah, again, it's got Dr. Satan, Ravenwood, Ascot Keen, Major Steel, Secret Agent X, and uh, to read the back of it just real quick, it
Okay.
says the threat of World War II looms over the eastern horizon, and America prepares for when it will enter the battle. When many masters of the occult and magical talismans from around the globe begin disappearing, intelligent officer Major Steele fears the Nazis are behind the kidnappings and thefts. He hurriedly enlists the aid of Secret Agent X, Ravenwood, and powerful mage Ascot Keen. Even their combined powers may not be sufficient, and so he is forced to reach out to the devil incarnate himself, the villainous Dr. Satan. Will the red-clad Satan accept the offer to become mankind's savior, or after the contest is settled, amass enough power to become its destroyer? Writer Glen Held, me, delivers a fast-paced, action-crammed pulp adventure with classic pulp heroes teaming up in the greatest adventures of their lives. So that's been out for a little while, available on Amazon. And again, the sequel is written. It's called Beat the Devil. Hopefully, it'll be out the end of this year. It's already been approved. Ron said he loves it. He can't wait to publish it. Just has to time wise wait for its time to come out.
Cool, cool. Okay. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know Ascot King was a magician because I heard it was more like it was not so much it was sort of like a somewhat audio book that someone was reading of
How's it feel?
the Doctor it's an audiobook of the original Doctor Satan stories. And I never knew that Ascot King was a magician. I always thought he was just like a police detective, just a police detective, just like a cop.
Yeah,
That's a
well, it depends which stories you read. He did have magical abilities. He did
okay.
somewhat, not as much as Dr. Satan at all, or some of the other ones like Ravenwood, but he did have some. I think there were six Dr. Satan stories published in Weird Tales, two or maybe eight. I think it was six. Two of them have were covers. One of them is pretty iconic, with Dr. Satan on the cover, sitting in his red uh, cloth
He's kind
outfit.
of like turned
With
sideways, like he's looking at the
yeah,
reader.
exactly, right. With his
I saw that because I saw that on my wish list as a cover on Amazon because I'm trying to end up doing like a long-term project I'm working on for my YouTube channel and my podcast. I'm sort of like covering various different aspects of the pulp industry. So I kind of have like a larger, wider branch of pulps to read, both new and old, and just sort of
Mhm.
collecting books one at a time when I can do it, and just sort of read and then do like an ultimate video essay.
Yeah, yeah, they're very good. You can find there's some paperback compilations of all the Dr. Satan stories
So,
um, that you could read. Not all of them are good, but they are very interesting. And boy, he found interesting ways to kill people, some of which I used in The Devil You Know to take people out as an homage to the original. But he's a great character. He was a lot of fun to write. I had him more as a theatrical kind of villain, like more of a Shakespearean kind of foe than others. And in the sequel to it, I do delve into what I think, what I made up as far as his origin goes, because there really isn't one. I think Barry Reese also hinted on his origin a few times. But even if that isn't his origin, he says Dr. Satan says it is. He's a liar. You can't believe him anyway. So
well, it's like he's like the Joker in the sense that
yeah,
this could be his origin or this could be his origin, but it's like it gets so convoluted that maybe even he doesn't remember. But like
right.
unlike the Joker, unless some licensing was taken with later stories, or in which case, like your book, unless he was like changed in such a way where he's kind of a little bit now more mentally unstable. But
Hmm. Yeah, but a fun character to work with, as I'm sure the Joker is.
well, thank you very much for your time and discussion today as we talked about Doc Talos and you gave our audience a bit of insight about your writing and your character. I can only speak for myself when I say I look forward to reading the next story, meeting between her and Ricky, and curious to see how this story goes from there. I guess I will ask, not trying to spoil the first story, but the Whisper, like, or the ending, but the Whisper and Doc Talos do meet, and there is like a whole gang fight scene. There's a lot of shooting involved. In later stories, I know you talk about this one with Ricky and the Whisper. Like, will there ever be a story where Doc Talos and the Whisper basically see each other or meet each other again?
Yes, not in the second one, which we said was with Ricky,
Okay.
and not in the third one, which is more of the Rennie character, but the third one sets up the fourth and the fifth, which where she wants to really take Doc Talos down and destroy him and finds a way to do it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to
Interesting.
say too much other than that right now.
Understood, which I understand that. Cool. Well, I thank you very much for your time today, Glenn.
Well,
I look
thank you,
forward to
Scott. Yeah, I
I look forward
appreciate being
to
on.
talking with you more again. Would you be interested in coming back again when, like, give it some time, like after your stories have come out, and maybe we can do like follow-up discussions, like, oh, here in this story, this is when this part happened. Well, of course, avoiding talking about too much spoilers or the ending, because again, I'm trying to also encourage people to want to read these for themselves
Right.
as well. But would you be interested in doing anything for follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I wish you a lot of success.
Thank you. Well, until then, dear viewers, this has been your agent from the Sanctum Files, and I will be back again next time with another adventure. Much thanks to Mr. Hold here for his time and patience with going through this. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you and or talk to you about your work, do you have like any socials, or are you open to like having people ask you questions, kind of like
Yeah,
how I?
absolutely, absolutely. Actually, my last name is Held, Held. So if
Sorry, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, no problem. I've been called much worse, believe me. So I'm on Facebook, Glenn. Just look up Glen Held, and you'll see me there, and you could ask whatever you want. Instagram, it's under Handsome GH. Believe it or not, that's supposed to be a joke, but Handsome GH at on Instagram, and just Glen Held. There's a couple of us, Glen Helds, but you'll see which one is me. The old guy with the goatee.
Okay. And you said the website to read some of these books was the pulp. Is it like pulpunderground.com, or do you just search it under those two words? Or is it
Yeah, I
just
think it's
pulp?
pulpunderground.com. That's where, Mal Dealey is the puts that together and has a lot of different things. Again, myself, Mal, what is it, Charles Millhouse, Jim Beard, John Bruning, lots of us, Bobby Nash, people are on there who deal with new pulp all the time, and it's really fun. You can see what's going on, what's in authors' minds. There are interviews. There are, again, a link to my short story if anybody wants to read it. And it's a lot of fun there. And again, if you're a Doc Savage fan, you really should join the Flea Run on Facebook, because that's the oldest, I believe, the oldest Doc Savage site on the internet. And he also comes out with a magazine, the Bronze Gazette, infrequently, but the 100th issue is coming out soon. Chuck Welch is in charge of it. Unbelievably fantastic what he knows and what he puts out.
Excellent. Well, once again, just wanted to say again, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. And until then, dear viewers, I will see you all next time. I've been Scott, and my co-host today, Glenn, and we thank you all.